There are a couple of everyday phrases that fit this story quite well. Phrases like, quit while you're ahead, don't push your luck, know when to fold 'em, and of course that old adage, under no circumstances attempt to perform a stunt if Evel Knievel himself says that it's just too damn dangerous. Alright, I made that last one up. But if that saying did exist, then Karel Soucek, the subject of today's video, would have been well advised to heed it. As we will see, instead, he chose to ignore it. Karel Soucek was a man on a mission to be a great stuntman and a celebrity to boot. Details of his early life are hazy. What we do know is that he was born in Czechoslovakia in 1947 and he was a tank commander in the Czech military. By the 1970s he'd managed to emigrate to Canada. Quite how he did this is somewhat vague. He may have defected, although there are no reports of this. Emigration from Soviet bloc countries was possible, but it was highly bureaucratic, lengthy and difficult. Nonetheless, by 1976 he was living in Canada, and aged just 29, he was trying his first stunt at the Niagara Falls, an aerial crossing of the massive Niagara whirlpool. Soucek attempted to ride a moped across the cable car wires of the Spanish Aerocar, a suspended gondola which takes passengers out above the whirlpool at a height of around 75 metres. How he got a moped up onto the top of those cables I've got absolutely no idea, but apparently he did and then tried to ride it across one of those cables. Needless to say, this was a total failure. The moped hit a bolt on the cable just 6 metres out and Soucek fell off. A safety harness saved his life on this occasion. What happened to the moped is unclear. Undaunted, Soucek next tried a barrel ride through the whirlpool rapids themselves. On the 11th of June 1977, Soucek, inside a steel barrel, spent over 3 hours spinning and bobbing in the rapids of the whirlpool before being rescued, pulled to shore, and then fined by the Niagara Parks police for performing an unauthorised stunt. But this wasn't all. At the same time as his Niagara escapades, he was also experimenting with wing walking and motorcycle jumps. Bob Lewis, president of the Oshawa Motorcycle Competition Club, remembered a couple of Soucek's jumps, mostly done on borrowed motorbikes, as Soucek apparently didn't even own a motorcycle. In one jump he tried to jump a row of cars, but ended up landing on the roof of the last one. Now this car had a dog inside on the back seat, and the crowd was apparently furious at Soucek for endangering the dog, and nobody was too worried about Soucek himself. In the winter of that year, during ice racing season, Soucek, on a borrowed Kawasaki KX250, performed another jump, which also ended unexpectedly. He overjumped the ramp, landing on the flat ice surface, losing control. Once he hit the snowbank at speed, it launched Karel into the air while the bike continued upright, crashing through the snow fence and taking out 4 spectators. Anyway, all of this was just leading up to Karel's big career-defining act, a trip over the Horseshoe Falls in his homemade barrel, which he had planned for July 1984. The last successful attempt had been made by a man named Nathan Boyer back in 1961, so no one had tried this for over 20 years. Now, unlike his previous stunts, it seems that Soucek took this seriously, and he did spend a lot of time and money preparing for his Niagara Falls barrel ride. He analysed the previous failures, the construction of the barrels which broke apart, and the currents of the falls. He even launched unmanned test barrels to see how they performed, all to try and give himself the best chance of survival. At 3 metres long and 1.5 metres wide, his barrel would be engineered to withstand the plunge. It had a steel skin with a reinforced plastic liner, lots of thick foam padding, a safety harness, twin snorkels for air supply, a 2-way radio, and importantly a ballast weight in one end to ensure that he got a feet-first landing. At 9:30 am on July 2, 1984, the barrel, with Soucek inside, was launched from the Canadian shore and was quickly swept downstream over the falls. 45 minutes later, the barrel was recovered and a grinning Soucek emerged. His injuries were minor, a gash in his forehead from where his watch had hit him, and some cuts and bruises. It was a dream come true. He'd done it. The 8th person to survive going over the falls, and, as his logo on the barrel said, the last of the Niagara daredevils. Recognition and minor celebrity followed. Soucek had spent $15,000 on the barrel and another $30,000 to film the whole escapade, but he more than made that back with interviews and TV appearances. For example, here he is a few months later, appearing on Late Night with David Letterman. Things were looking good, and right here is where he should have stopped. But he didn't. Soucek now wanted to build a museum or a small exhibition centre about himself at Niagara Falls, but he needed money to do it. To raise these funds, he decided to do another stunt, a recreation of his barrel drop, but this time from the roof of the Houston Astrodome. He would enter a slightly smaller barrel and be dropped from the roof apex, some 63 metres above the playing field, into a tank of water. Now, here's the problem. In my opinion, this is exactly the type of stunt that any stuntman should avoid. Ideally, a stunt should be dramatic and spectacular, but the stuntman should have a pretty good chance of surviving it. And this barrel drop seems to me, at least, to be almost the polar opposite. An extremely risky stunt with a high probability of injury, but a stunt that doesn't look that impressive when observed. I mean, if I was there that night and they announced a barrel drop from the roof into a tank of water, I might think about nipping off to the loo and grabbing some popcorn while that was going on. It just doesn't sound that exciting. And yet, it's extremely dangerous to perform. Veteran stuntman Evel Knievel had apparently told Soucek not to go ahead with it, saying that the stunt was the most dangerous that I've ever seen. But Soucek was undaunted and went ahead anyway. The stunt was to take place on the 19th of January 1985 as part of a thrill, show and destruction derby programme hosted at the Astrodome. The man-sized reinforced barrel was suspended high up in the roof, while the crowd of 35,000 watched from below. But up in the gantry, the crew were experiencing some difficulties as the barrel kept spinning on its harness. One unnamed workman later said, "It started spinning real bad. After a while, the people started getting so impatient that we just went ahead and dropped him. Just as we started to release the barrel, it started spinning again." Soucek plunged earthwards. There was no room for error. The tank which he was aiming for was just a tad over 3 metres wide. But he missed the middle. The barrel clipped to the edge of the tank as it splashed down. Soucek's injuries would have been violent and severe. There's no coming away with just a scratched forehead this time. The crowd initially applauded, but the mood became more sombre when paramedics were rushed in and the barrel was cut open. A badly injured Soucek, amazingly still alive, was rushed to the Ben Taub Hospital, but he died soon after. Apparently he succumbed quickly before the show had even ended. He suffered a fractured skull, crushed abdomen and chest, massive internal bleeding, and multiple skin ruptures. Why did Soucek carry on with the stunt when it was obviously not a good idea? We'll never know. During 2 practice drops, apparently one already went wrong, but Soucek decided to go ahead anyway. Maybe after surviving the Niagara Falls, you feel like you can survive anything, but reality bites harder than any misplaced optimism. Karel Soucek lived and died by his own motto, emblazoned on his barrel and on his tombstone. It's not whether you fail or triumph, it's that you keep your word and at least try.